Hello everyone and welcome to our debate. I'm Junior Sarasti and today I'm joined by my colleagues Kayla Miranda and Astrid Garnica. Together we'll be exploring an important question in bilingual education here in Colombia. Our focus will be on the challenges of applying English for specific purposes when students prepare for their Icfes or Prueba Saber 11. So before continuing with the topic, we need to understand what is English for a specific purpose. So according to Smoke, let me move over here. According to Smoke 2003, ESP is English for English instruction based on actual and immediate needs of learners. ESP is needs-based and task-oriented. In other words, ESP is an approach used when students need to learn something, when students based on the students' needs and the students' reasons for learning. Another use that Anthony 2007 explains is that English can be used in academic studies or for travel and professional purposes, representing a population of professionals engaged in their own fields of study. One example of English for specific purposes is those people who work in a call center or people who need to learn English for working abroad, or in this case, students that need to have a good score in their exams, their Icfes exam. So with this in mind, there is a short definition of what Saber 11 exams are. The Saber 11 exam evaluates the competences developed by students in secondary education in order to provide information for access to higher education and for the formulation of educational policies. So now that we have a little context about what is Icfes and what is ESP, or English for specific purposes, this is our main topic, our main question that we're going to be discussing in today's debate. What challenges arise when applying ESP to help Colombian students succeed in the Prueba Saber? Through this discussion, there are going to be 3 or more questions or topics that may arise. The first one I want to show you is this one. Are schools ready to design contextualized materials? Do teachers have the training and resources to balance exam preparation with the development of broader communicative skills? And finally, how do these challenges impact students in public schools, especially those ones where resources are limited? Now, our partner Astrid is going to continue with the presentation or with the debate, sharing to us on advantages and challenges. So Astrid, we are all yours.
Hi everyone. Those are indeed crucial questions, and I would like to approach them from the perspective of ESP. When we prepare students for the Icfes exams in English, it is not enough to simply tell them to read and just comprehension to develop in its own. With an ESP framework, strategic reading provides a student with concrete tools, organizing ideas, taking notes, using reference, and applying different strategies depending on the type of test. This approach is not only to improve exams, it also builds autonomy as a student learns to transfer this skill to academic and professional contexts. In other words, ESP is not just about vocabulary and grammar. It's about training learners to use reading strategies that make comprehension possible and meaningful. As Gray say, 2000 cited in Bautista 2017, points out comprehension depending on practicing multiple strategies with clear purpose and expectations. This is why our role as teachers is to ensure these strategies become an essential part of exam preparation?
Well, guys, I have a different perspective on ESP courses in this specific case for Icfes exams. Because preparing students for standardized tests like Icfes reduces English teaching to a test-taking strategy rather than a dynamic practice to foster the communicative competence that is one of the most important ones. For example, Tovar and Guerrero analyzed some perceptions of university teachers, and they found that there is a dominance of summative assessment and that these teachers provided feedback based on the error correction. So some abilities that are as well important, like listening and speaking, are undervalued because the main focus relies on vocabulary recognition, learning grammar, and the students, yes, they acknowledge good scores on the exams, but they lack the ability to communicate effectively in real-life situations.
Of course, that is a good point of view. Another important advantage of this type of ESP preparations is that practice-oriented. By practice, I mean the connection between knowledge, reflection, and action. As Aristotle explained long ago, practice is an intentional action that unites what we learn with a clear purpose. Also, as Londoño pointed out in 2021, the link between reflection and practice is what we prepare a student for real goals. So in this way, these courses do more than just training a student for Icfes exam. They help them apply strategies, linking preparation with real context, where English becomes a practical and useful tool.
Well, I think that argument overlooks an important point, and is that those are short-term learning pedagogies. So those ESP courses designed for exam usually prioritize memorization and patterns. And we all know that knowledge based on memorization is short-lived, and it does not contribute to long-term language acquisition. For example, these students might learn a long list of vocabulary for a multiple choice exam, but at the end, they will forget those words because they were not used in a real context, maybe in a real conversation. So we have some authors like Ganesan, Abdul, and Ismail who affirm that learning vocabulary requires meaningful interaction with language, and the use of mental processes, because they will help students to retain and understand the information more effectively.
Well, in this case, I agree with you. That is the last advantage I highlight. It is curriculum alignment. The Icfes test includes 7 actions, as you know: reading, grammar, vocabulary, always connected with real life. For example, students often see short things, signs, or ads like "don't feed the animals" in a park. These situations are not only practical for the exam, but also prepare them for future daily experiences, or even traveling abroad. This type of course is designed with that in mind. As Londoño say, 2021, pedagogical models help us define and organize the content that we teach, so aligning with the test is not accidental. It guides the material we use. In other words, the success of this kind of course depends on how teachers design authentic and meaningful materials.
Well, I consider that sounds good in theory, but in practice it is a disregard for learning styles, because these students are reading generally, they read artificial texts about grammar, and we are not taking into account the different learning styles. Some authors have demonstrated that it is important to take into account students' needs and students' preferences before we plan or we design our classes or our teaching programs, because these exam-driven approaches often limit learners' opportunities to explore cultural aspects, critical thinking, creativity, because they are not focused on the cultural aspects or cultural topics that are priority for the students, like music, history, or, for example, global issues, which are essential goals of language acquisition.
So we can conclude that, or we believe that these types of ESP courses become truly effective when they are adapted to a real context as public school teachers. So in fact, we are already applying this approach, since our focus is on preparing students for the Icfes. But what really matters is that the materials we use are aligned with the text sessions and that the topics are interesting and meaningful for our students' learning. So that would be all. These are the references that we use